Welcome. We're going to be talking about Internet of some things and some SDR. And this huge room really makes me look unpopular. Sad. But you know what? I'm still going to take a crowdy. That's a thing, right? Everyone cheer or raise their hands or something. Woo! Yay! Okay. Now when I tweet that, it'll look even less popular. My 5 followers will love it. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple of things. This is all based on some research I did for my master's thesis last winter, which was incredibly painful. A long report, lots of writing. If you've done that already, I commend you, and if you plan to do that, I feel bad for you. But it will be awesome when you're done. Trust me. Okay. So does anybody know what this thing's called, by the way? See that? Have any clue what that is? All right, I do have prizes, too, for correct answers. So this is called a Davy Crockett launcher that launches that little football-sized bomb-looking thing on the front, which is actually a nuclear warhead. It may or may not have inspired this little baby right here from a game that you may or may not have played. So anyway, good times. So who am I? My name is Erich, Ficker, and I race cars sometimes. I do some other stuff as well. I work for the Cadence Group. If you also look at your lanyard, you'll see that we love Saintcon, so we sponsored some stuff as well. So go Saintcon! Woo! I don't even know what it's like to put on a conference, so these guys are all awesome. So whenever you see the black badge, which is I can't remember what it says on it. It says some words. But those are the guys that are like getting here at 6 and going to bed at 1 a.m., that kind of stuff. So definitely give them a high five and maybe even a hug if you're feeling friendly. I like Taco Bell breakfast every Saturday. Super yummy if you haven't had it. Morning crunch wraps with bacon. Trust me. I spoke last year about some fishing stuff. I have some certifications. There's some contact info, which I'll show at the end. Okay, funny story. We had a company party at the Top Golf up in Salt Lake where you golf into some stuff, and I tried to create an account. It said my last name was a non-family friendly content. Sad. Good times. All right, so what are we going to do today? We're going to look at some stuff. We're going to look at some basic RF theory. So if you've never heard of RF or can't even spell RF, you're good. Hopefully we'll get you to a place where you can at least figure out what's going on. If you're RF expert, my apologies, just give us some patience. We're going to talk about SDR a little bit. For those of you who don't know, that's software-defined radio. That allows computers to broadcast over radio waves, which is really, really cool. And then we're going to talk about the research I did last winter and some stuff that's broken. I'm going to try and do a demo. We'll see how that works. I have a Mac, so it just works, right? And then we're going to talk about how we can fix it. Spoiler alert, we can't fix it. Okay. Okay, so this is the frequency spectrum, and this includes visible light all the way to like things that are really like direct circuit, which basically has no waves at all. So radio frequency is broken up into what are called bands, and bands just say, hey, this frequency to this frequency. Sometimes it has a unique property within that area, but as long as you know that, you're in pretty good shape. Some bands are reserved for amateur radios. Anybody in here a ham radio operator? There's those. That's my crew right there. Nice. And then professional broadcasting, listen to the radio, used to be, and in TV as well. And then some bands are reserved for what's called ISM, or industrial, science, and medical. And these are the bands that basically any device you buy that just broadcasts radio frequency resides in one of these bands. So Wi-Fi has a couple of bands that it broadcasts on. Does anybody remember 900 megahertz cordless phones? Yeah, I'm almost 40, sorry. And then, of course, cell phones also use radio frequencies. So those are all usually within the ISM band. Cells not, maybe. But anyway, so all the things that we're testing today on this display of doom are fall in that ISM band, which means pretty much anybody can broadcast anything on those frequencies. They have to go through FCC approval to make sure they're not overly saturating radio frequency bands, but pretty much free for all. There's different types of things. So let's see. Let's talk about, so radio's broadcast medium, which means send it once, lots of people can receive, okay? Almost anybody within range, so an infinite amount within the range of the broadcast. How strong that signal travels, how far it travels, anybody in that range can get it. That's same with Wi-Fi, right? And that's why sometimes we try and limit our Wi-Fi broadcast to at least like the 3rd Street over in our neighborhood. And then it travels really fast, speed of light. Does anybody know what the speed of light is in empirical units? Winner. I'm gonna throw. I don't. Just come up and get it. I'll set it right here. It might be heavy. I don't want to hit anybody. So I do have some RTL SDRs. Yep, that's you. That we're just giving away. They're cheap, and they can get you started in some SDR stuff, which we'll talk about. So fast, right? Speed of light's fast, pretty fast, and it can carry data. Okay, so think about Morse code. Everybody familiar with Morse code? At least a little bit. So there's short bursts and longer times you hold down a little thing. I don't know Morse code, but I know there's bits and dots, right? Isn't that what they're called? You want to back me up? Okay, nobody. Okay. There we go. I like it. So anyway, so it's really just a complex form of that, okay? We take this radio wave, we broadcast on it, and we change the way we broadcast or the way how much power we put into it, or and vary that, or we change how we send the pulses, which is kind of like Morse code. So it's really just like complex, really fast Morse code. So it's not too crazy, and there's a couple different ways you do that. It's called modulation, and you've heard of some, okay? FM, frequency modulation, AM, amplitude modulation. So some are pretty popular, some are less popular, but yeah. So that's radio frequency. Okay. Does anybody know what this is a photo of, by the way? Can you guys see that? The back, whatnot. What? Nothing? Winner. So I'm going to set this right here and make you walk all the way up here. It is, yeah, it's called the Russian woodpecker, and I don't know, I'm obsessed with like old abandoned Russia because I think it's awesome that they spent all this money and now the stuff just like rusting out there. But yeah, so it's called the Duga array, and it made a mess of the radio waves for many, many years. It didn't broadcast constantly, but when it turned on, it was on everything, and they called it the Russian woodpecker because it was kind of a woodpecker sound. But go on Wikipedia, guaranteed to put you to sleep if you're insomnia. Okay, so we talked about broadcasting a little bit. Relatively difficult to determine the source. This giant broadcaster, which by the way, this picture doesn't do it justice. I have another photo in a minute, but it's huge. In fact, does anybody know where this is besides the orange shirt guy? Okay. It's not far from a little place called Chernobyl. Is anybody familiar with that? I'm also obsessed with Chernobyl. But they were so worried, this is so big, they were worried that if this rusted and fell, it would cause microquakes and break the sarcophagus of concrete around the nuclear breach over at Chernobyl. I mean, and it's not like next door, it's like a mile away or maybe 2 miles away. So it's giant. Anyway, so even though this is huge and was destroying like all radio frequency, all over the world, on certain bands, they couldn't quite tell where this was at first. Finally, they started tracking it down. They did find it eventually, but Russia wasn't super keen on having visitors at the time. So difficult to determine the source, impossible to determine who the recipients are, right? Because you're broadcasting to N recipients, so any number of recipients. And now, does anybody see maybe some things that could go wrong with using RF as a network medium without taking other precautions for protections? Yeah, it's going to everybody and it's wide open. If you send, it's like, what is it like? It's worse than emailing a text file. It's more like, yeah, it's more like wearing a t-shirt with your password. Tweeting a text, that works too. Okay, and the layer 1 signals, again, just pulses on a wave. So send out a little radio frequency, change it a little bit, and then we can send data over it. All right, so we have things that can broadcast like ham radios, okay? We have cordless phones, cell phones, those are all over RF. But let's not leave computers out of this. Computers want to broadcast too, guys. Let's not leave them. Let's be sensitive to the computers. Once there are overlords, they'll appreciate it. So that's where software-defined radio. There's another photo of the Duga array and another little Duga array next to it, which I can't remember exactly what it's for. Those are like 4 or 5 story buildings in the foreground, by the way. Those are huge apartment buildings. This thing is giant. Seriously, look it up. Can't sleep. Okay. So a software-defined radio uses integrated circuits to control different things that you can do to broadcast radio frequency. Okay. So now we can control that with a computer. Some things use computers. Cell phones use a computer to do stuff like that, integrated circuits. But software-defined radio allows us to change it kind of on the fly. It's more general-purpose radio, if you will. Where all of like your Wi-Fi, if you buy a Wi-Fi access point, it's designed to broadcast on 2.4 gig or 5 gig. It does very specific things. This allows us to do lots of different things. Usually have a pretty wide frequency range, which is nice. The RTL SDRs that I'm giving out are like $10, and they go from pretty low frequency, I think, up to about a gig, which is a pretty wide range of frequency. A lot of stuff broadcasting in there. A lot of ISM bands, like your car tires are telling your car how much air in them within that range. Dog shock collars are in that range. Don't get any ideas. Software to control them. GNU Radio is kind of the Linux de facto. There's another one for Windows. Full disclosure, I've never used the Windows one, but it's called WinSDR. Supposedly supposed to be okay. And then it requires a hardware adapter, just like to get on any network. So, again, RTL SDR, somewhere between 10 and $20. HackRF1 is the next step up. It's kind of a jump in price. But it's about $300, really cool. This is one here you won't be able to see. I've got photos in a minute. And then you can spend X after that, X squared to oblivion, basically. So then, why do we want to do this? Because we can. Because people wrote software that broadcasts on these frequencies, and we don't get to see it unless we like dig into it a little bit. So that's why I wanted to see it. So this is the adapter to speak RF. Okay, this is how your computer speaks RF. The top is the HackRF1. It's got a little backpack thing on it with a screen, and then you can run on a battery, fun stuff like that. The bottom one is called a yardstick one. It's kind of similar range to the RTL SDR. One limitation of the RTL SDR is you can only receive. So you can analyze signals, receive signals, and you can do quite a bit and play around with that, but you can't broadcast, you can't transmit. So the HackRF1 allows you to transmit, has a wider range of frequency, costs more money. Yardstick's the same way, it's about $100. Works in a similar bands, but again, allows you to transmit. Also, there's software. It runs the same chip and is flashed with RFCAT, if anybody's familiar, which is just some firmware that allows you to control it with specific software. And there's lots of libraries. You can control that with Python. Does anybody do Python in here? Yeah, Python. That's because it's awesome. So, pretty cool stuff. Again, some of this I probably already covered. I don't click fast enough. So the other thing, so we can decode RF broadcasts or demodulate them into a value or into data that's meaningful to us. Okay, if we put, I'll show you in a minute what it looks like, but if you just look at what it looks visually, it's just waves, and you get some spikes, and there's not much usable data there. So what we can do with software is take that, apply kind of the inverse of the modulation, and then pull out data, which is really cool. So we can, it's like what Wi-Fi does for you automatically. Your adapter and your Wi-Fi driver do those things automatically for you. You don't see those things. We're doing them a little more manually, but we can do any of them. We have to know how to do it, and that's kind of the learning curve. The real value is we can look at things that devs never really thought people would actually see. And that's kind of the main problem of IoT in general, and specifically my focus and my focus of my thesis was RF networking with IoT devices. So yeah, from there we can capture, do things, replay, create our own packets of data, send them out to do very specific things. So jam, although don't tell a ham about jamming. That's bad news, right? Hams, we gotta be respectful, which I agree with. So don't jam, but you could. All right. So if you want to go further on SDR, Michael Osman, who actually created the HackerRF one and the Yardstick one, he has this awesome radio, this series called Software Farm Radio with HackRF. It also works with RTL, SDR. You just can't broadcast, so you can go through a lot of that stuff. There's like 11 videos. The last video shows you how to capture things and replay them. It's worth it. You can go through them in a day if you like, but they're really well done. And if you're interested, you can learn quite a bit about SDR in just 6 or 7 hours. Obtain some hardware, run through the lessons, and then start capturing RF traffic that devs never thought you'd see and never took any precautions to protect. All right. So for my research specifically, I needed a way to measure the state of affairs of this RF networking IoT. So I needed a yardstick to base my argument on for my thesis. So I selected some very elite contestants and kind of made a list of what could possibly go wrong, created a testing procedures. This is how you test this, and if it reacts this way, then it means this. So I went through all these, created these, and then used them against every system. So yeah, that took some time, but it was good. It was a good exercise. It's not unlike defining the threats for your own, say, organization or specific application. What are the specific threats to this application? What are ways that people can abuse this X, and what can they obtain if they're successful? That kind of thing. So it's pretty straightforward, InfoSec, Analyst 1 type stuff. Then again, I applied to the ecosystem. So without further ado, here are the contestants, and they are number 1, Samsung SmartThings. They make things to automate your house, also exploding phones. Hopefully not exploding TVs, or else my living room could get ugly quick. They have, so for RF networking with the SmartThings, which SmartThings was an acquisition. Samsung didn't just create this, but they have a couple of radios, 3 actually. So Z-Wave is one, and that's a pretty standard. It's closed, but it's fairly standardized. I don't know what the right term would be. Anyway, protocol, I guess, for RF broadcasts securely, maybe. Zigbee's another one. That's actually pretty open, and then it has a Bluetooth radio as well that's inactive on this device, probably because they don't want to pay licensing fees. For this exercise, I just looked at Z-Wave. I ran out of time to look back at Zigbee, some other things. So the next contestant is Insteon. Insteon does a lot of home automation. They're kind of, I call them kind of the Home Depot automation. Home Depot has a lot of their stuff. It's kind of available in brick and mortar stores. I saw it at Costco the other day. They're a little bit interesting in the fact they have this proprietary RF protocol and modulation, but they also use the AC power lines as a network. So you've got kind of a wired network, and then you've got this RF that's pretty opaque in general. Not anymore, but it was. They created it to be that way. And the last one is SimpliSafe. And if you haven't heard of SimpliSafe, I hadn't either. I was looking for a third contestant, and I started looking around on Amazon, the highest kind of the best sellers in different categories. One of the other goals is I wanted to assess some. I didn't want to hack like the fish on the wall, right? Because dumb. So I wanted something that people actually relied on for some sort of physical security or interaction with their home, something that actually did something in real life. So all of these fall into that category. SimpliSafe specifically is a home security system. They don't have an option to control your lights. All they do is your security, so they must do it well. No. They have 2 different frequencies they use in their system. We'll go over that a little bit. And a pretty straightforward modulation scheme. So as far as docks go for these 3 ecosystems, so Z-Wave is somewhat documented. The encrypted stuff on Z-Wave is not. The non-encrypted stuff's pretty documented. Zigbee is pretty documented. Insteon, their docks are false, so they put out docks and they're just lies, so that doesn't help us. And then SimpliSafe, they don't have any docks, and they don't have an API, or they don't encourage other manufacturers to integrate into their system. So there's no real docks there. But the real reason I picked SimpliSafe was because I went on Amazon and it had like 10,000 reviews, almost. And I thought, if 10,000 people almost took time to like write a sentence or 2 about how awesome SimpliSafe was, then it's probably worth taking a look at. I don't know I'm sure there's some metric or ratio of people that write reviews to how many people have actually bought on Amazon. I don't know what that is, but Amazon does. But I guarantee you it's a multiplier, probably an exponential. So a lot of these are out there. They're fairly inexpensive, and I'm like, who has these things? I've never seen one. And I went to my friend's house, and there was one. I'm like, please. Okay. And the other real reason I went for it is because Dave Ramsey says SimpliSafe can make home feel safe again. Sounds oddly like a presidential campaign slogan, but okay. So let's talk a little bit more about Samsung Smart Things. So we looked at EasyWave, and I used I think I brought one, like you're going to be able to see it, but oh, here it is. I used the Yardstick one, which is this little guy. Little dongle. If anybody's played with the Ubertooth one, it's built on the same size PCB. They're about $100, and it uses RF-Cat firmware on there, so we can control it with Python, which I like. And then, so Z-Wave, we looked at that. It uses a home ID, which is kind of just what it sounds like. It's an ID for your home, address for your specific network, and then node IDs for all the little things, the remotes. Let's see, what else are there? Door sensors, motion sensors, smoke alarms, that kind of thing. So those are the node IDs. Those are the nodes. Pretty self-explanatory. And then we used the Yardstick 1 with Scapy Radio and EasyWave, which is a tool, and I can't remember who wrote it at the moment, but I do have some on the last slide. And if you look at those, there'll be some data in there, citing my sources, because, you know, thesis and all. But that allows us to access that protocol. And then our big vulnerability here is message replay, but we can also craft packets. So anytime you can craft packets and make things do what you want them to do, that's bad, right? Usually bad. Okay, so let's look at how this works, actually. So this is a Z-Wave packet. And this isn't specific necessarily to Smart Things. It's just, this is Z-Wave. This is implementation of Z-Wave. Lots of devices and ecosystems use it. So we've got a little string at the beginning, which is the sync string. Just says, hey, radio, I'm broadcasting to you. This is the frequency in which I'm going to broadcast to you. Then gives the home ID. The home ID is static for the entire network. So we've got 4 bytes there. And then we have, the next byte is the sender. So 01 is always the controller, or kind of the main box right here, which is basically just the interface between the nodes and whatever it's talking to. For SimpliSafe, it talks to the cloud. And then, of course, with your phone app, etc., you can log in and talk to the cloud, which talks to your device, which talks to your nodes. So it's basically just a bridge between those. But that is 01, is that address. And then we have the destination address, which is that 05 there. And then the next byte is what makes the difference between secure and insecure communication. So the 20 means this is a straightforward command. The problem with that, it's a basic command. The problem with that is there is no encryption. Okay, tweeting your password, t-shirt password, this is just what it is. We're sending it in the clear. And then we have the action there, that double F. Anyone want to guess what that does? If that was pointed at a, I believe this is pointed at a light. Anyone want to guess what double F? Say again? So close. Ah, who said on? There we go, winner. Okay, yeah. So turns it on. So I have, thanks to EasyWave, I now have all the data I need to recreate my own packet to have this node do whatever I want it to do. All right, so let's look at a secure packet. Z-Wave actually does provide an encrypted mechanism to do this, and it's that 9.8 byte there. So if it passes a 9.8, then the node knows, hey, this is going to be an encrypted transmission. Everything after this is encrypted. Okay, that's good. The problem is there's only one device that I tested that uses the 9.8, and it was a deadbolt. So congrats to Z-Wave. We're at least encrypting the thing that stops people from walking right in the front door. Okay, it doesn't stop our hacker neighbor from annoying us, but what can we ask for, right? So that's something. Right, so that feels better. Okay, so let's look at Insteon for a minute. So has anybody played with a burnd0wn Black ever? Does anything on the screen look familiar? Like the burnd0wn Black on the left there? The other one is the Insteon controller with its thin candy shell off. For those of you who don't know, the burnd0wn Black is a hobby board. It's kind of like a Raspberry Pi, if you're familiar, or an Arduino, a little higher power. It runs Linux. So in Insteon's defense, burnd0wn Black is designed also to be a reference board, so manufacturers can build designs on it. But I mean, it just looks like a burnd0wn. It's missing the video out chip, but I played a little bit with physical attacks on these. They're outside the scope of this talk and my thesis, but for a little spoiler alert, I took a burnd0wn Black OS on an SD card, plugged it into the Insteon controller, and booted into full Linux, and then had access to the onboard embedded file system, which is also Linux. At that point, I could change SSH keys and then SSH to the Insteon natively as root, of course. So there's some stuff that I didn't get into that you could get into that's fun, but yeah. So again, proprietary protocol. I'm having trouble remembering that word today. Similar to Z-Wave, uses a home ID and node IDs. Again, we use the yardstick one. So Peter Shipley's kind of a hacker superstar guy, and 2 years ago at DEF CON, he did a talk about Insteon because he had it in his house, and he's like, I want this to do other things. And found out that all the docs were garbage, did his own reverse engineering, released a tool, it's called Insteon RF, had a few bugs that I helped him work out, but he wrote the bulk of it. All I did was like some error handling. But yeah, once we were able to get that working, packet forgery, so I could decode packets just like the Z-Wave setup, and then also replay messages. So we didn't talk about replay on the Samsung, but replay is basically, it's the equivalent of, so now I'm really going to show my age. So phone phreaking, do you know how that works? Raise your hand if you know how phone phreaking works. Right there, brief three-word synopsis or 3-sentence synopsis. Perfect. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. There you go. Yeah, so basically, and there were other attacks where you could record the tones of the phone, of the coins, right? Everybody's seen Hackers. Who hasn't seen Hackers in here? If you haven't seen it, go home and watch it. It's awesome, right? From year I graduated high school. But it's simple as recording what you hear, what the radio, the SDR hears, and then saving on your computer as a file, and then replaying it back out through the radio. That's how easy that attack is. Anytime you can capture traffic and then replay it, and it does the same thing as the original sender, horrible, right? Awesome for us, not great for people who rely on these things. So in addition to that, also packet forgery. So similar to Z-Wave, we can craft our own packets. And this is what this looks like. So we've got the destination. There's no real home node on Insteon. It's kind of all peer-to-peer. So we have the destination address and the source address, and then we have the command. And the only thing that like could stop you from doing this is the CRC check, which you can just calculate based on the message. So it's pretty straightforward. And then now that I know what I need to do, I can craft my own packet there on the bottom and resend that to replay or brute force or X, Y, whatever you want to do to this thing. So basically wide open. Insteon claims that their addressing is the secure part of their protocol, and that no one with an Insteon system or ecosystem can get those addresses. So the addresses are, or that's not part of the Insteon system. So the addresses are a 3, you're not going to be able to see it. There's a 3 octet identifier in hex on each device. So you can use that to train it to the main hub, but they claim that those are secure. Unless you have physical access to the devices, you cannot take over this network. Problem is, all these are broadcast in the clear on RF, and once you know how to demodulate that signal, which is fairly straightforward, you have all the addresses. The other worrisome thing about how Insteon works is that if your next door neighbor has Insteon, and there's a node, say, in the back of your house, and between that node and the central hub, there's another node in your neighbor's house that's closer than the hub, it will actually broadcast that message to your neighbors and then to your network. So nothing could go wrong there, right? So your neighbor's getting this message. If your neighbor isn't like us, then they might not know what's happening, but that's how that works. Great for uptime, which is what people design these things to be, right? Resilient. They design them to work. Sounds like a good idea on paper, not great for security. So there's some other things you can do to exploit that. There's a measurement of how far the distance is traveled. It will die after a while to prevent kind of like a storm of traffic. But again, you can monkey with that to DOS somebody's Insteon network. And I didn't even get into the mains power network at all. So that would be interesting if you plug an extension cord into somebody's outside outlet, if you could just take over their Insteon network. I'm sure you could. I'm sure that's all it would take. But in their defense, you'd have to be there physically. All right. Yeah, so their claim of security is not true, obviously. The public docs they released are just false. In fact, Peter Shipley's talk at DEF CON 2 years ago is basically all about how the docs are garbage. So there's a lot of swearing and other things that happen in that talk, but it's pretty good. Okay, let's see. So we crafted some packets. Evil emoji. Let's talk about SimpliSafe for a minute. Okay, so SimpliSafe uses 2 frequencies, so it's more secure, right? No, it's horrible. I call the 2 frequencies trash and garbage. So it's a little, I mean, this is pretty easy to find out, and we'll talk about how to get started messing with SDR in a minute. But once you know the frequencies, which are publicly available, if they're not even printed on the device, which sometimes they are, you just have to understand how the communication works, and then you're golden. So basically, there's a keypad and a hub. This is the hub. Looks like this thing. Weird. I would not want this in my living room. And then there's a keypad, which looks pretty straightforward, except for maybe from the 80s. And then this broadcasts on one frequency, this receives on one frequency, this broadcasts on the other frequency, this receives on the other frequency, and these are the 2 main pieces of the whole system. There's door sensors, some remotes, motion stuff, normal home security stuff. Obviously, they were going for a wireless install, not expensive. Let's get Dave Ramsey on board, but it's just horrible. So for this exercise, I used the Hack RF1 and GNU Radio, which is really cool, and we're going to show you that. What else is here? I'm going to show you that, and then and we're going to do a demo and see if we can real-time disarm a SimpliSafe. So, good times. So this is both packet forgery and message replay. Michael Ossman, actually, I'm in the middle of my research this February. I started my research in December. I get to the SimpliSafe ecosystem. I'm like, okay, let's dig into this thing. I was kind of excited because there was no previous research on it. There's a little bit of research on Z-Wave, and then Peter Shipley's research on Insteon. I'm like, okay, here we're going to blaze some trails here. And I do a quick Google, and like the day before, some research surfaced from a guy that hooked up a bunch of wires to all the test points and owned the system. Looked like a ton of work. Like, I was not going to do that. But then that prompted Michael Ossman to take a look at it, and basically he broke the whole thing. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess I saved time. I get to spend more time writing. But yeah. So neither of them released any tools for that, so we're just kind of on our own there. And I'll show you how to go about that, doing that, and just kind of assessing anything that looks interesting, anything that's wireless. Yeah, good times. So let's see, do we go into that now? I think so. Okay, so there we go. So this is the back of the keypad that I have here. And it's going to be a little bit difficult to read because it's raised in there. It's not printed, but it says FCC ID above that gray printed stuff. And then it has a series of numbers and letters. Okay? So what do we do with that? No, way too much work. Who said that? Raise your hand. Not winner. Way too much work. So what we do is, although you could do that, in fairness. So, in fact, I feel bad now. I publicly shamed you. You get a winner. Okay. So, FCC.io is really cool. Somebody set this up. I can't remember his name. But you can put in the FCC ID after FCC.io. Notice, oh, you can't see it on here. It is encrypted. I don't know why it's not on that, but that's SSL. But anyway, / your FCC ID, which, by the way, is printed on anything that is legally sold in the US to transmit RF data or any kind of RF frequency at all. So if you, your phone will have it on there. Some are printed on the outside. I think Apple's are, which is super annoying. But you can pull a cover off of anything. Usually it's on the outside. It's pretty easy to find. When I was putting this talk together, I pulled up the transmitter from my quadcopter, and it's right there. Pulled it up, looked it up. Anyway, so the good thing about FCC.io is you don't have to dig through this weird search thing. There's like 100 fields. You put this in here, or there's a search field on FCC.io as well if you don't want to type in the address bar. And then that will bring up, it'll take you to this screen, which is the FCC's website. And then they'll have reports based on their interference testing of this device, which are all public. There'll be photos of what they call EUT, the equipment under testing. There'll be photos with the case off, so if you want to look at what this thing looks like before you open it, you can do that. They have the results of the interference. We don't really care about that. We just want to know what's going on in there. So some of them, they're even listed on this info page. Otherwise, you got to drill into the PDFs. There's usually about 5 to 7 for each specific device. But this one, luckily, is just right on here. So the frequency for the keypad is 433.92 megahertz. Okay, there it is. That's it. That's the keys to the kingdom right there. As far as SimpliSafe goes, no one can obtain that frequency and listen to their devices, except for we just did. So then what we do with that information, even without knowing anything else, so we've talked about modulation, we've talked about data transmission, we've talked about demodulating, getting that data out of the RF stream. We're not even going to do any of that stuff. We're just going to do what you can do. There's a learning curve. And it would take longer than 50 minutes to explain. But we're just going to do the easy stuff because I'm lazy. You may or may not be lazy. I like to think hackers in general are lazy. That's why we do things more efficiently, right? Right, guys? Okay. All right, so we're going to pull up. This is GNU Radio Companion. Okay, it's a GUI tool, which is sweet. Not Linux doesn't always have GUI tools. If you think about each one of these blocks, as they're called, represent something, not necessarily something physical, but kind of a different component of the radio. So we're kind of building the radio here. So if you look at the source is going to be where we're starting. Okay, that makes sense, right? So for this specific thing, this is the first piece of the demo, and we're actually going to do a demo after I explain how it works. But it is the radio. That's the block that interfaces with the hardware, in this case, HackRF. Okay? So you can set all the settings in there, do all the things, and then connect it to other things, which if you were doing this in the physical world, you'd be like having wires and jumpers and stuff that takes a lot of time and sounds like a lot of work. But because of this, we can just do it by dragging your mouse across. Okay, so the GUI FFT sync, all that is a visualization of what's happening on the radio, which is fine. And then the next thing, the sync, which are what both of these are, is where it's going to end. Okay, so we have that visualization sync, which is just a graph, and then the file sync, we're going to save the file. So the only thing we're doing in this flow graph is we have a source, we're going to listen to some frequencies, and then we're going to show them on a graph, and then record them to a file. That's it. There's a couple of settings and stuff in there that you need to know. Again, Michael Austin's videos will get you through those. It's, again, more than 50 minutes worth of data, but I recommend it. This is the other half. Okay, so now we've captured some data from RF transmission into a file, and now we're going to fire it from the computer out through the radio. Okay, just like that. I don't know where that came from. Anyway, so we've got the file source, which is this file on my hard drive, and then the Osmocom sync, which is the radio, and there's a couple of settings in there, including the frequency. You can probably see that 433.8, which is slightly off from the main frequency of the device by design, and you'll have to watch those videos to find out why. And then the visualization sync. So we're sending it from the file to the radio and then to the graph. Okay. All right, here we go. So I have, can we turn on the stick mic? I have a working SimpliSafe alarm here, and we are going to, actually, let's, oh, you're going to have to, hold on. There we go. Okay, so I showed you those slides before because there's no way to make this font any bigger, unfortunately, but I'll kind of explain what I'm doing as we go. So we've got capture, so we're going to capture this, and we're going to change the file name because I have a working file in there. We're going to do this full demo style. So let's do, this is going to be the Prezo file. Okay, so I'm just changing the file name so you know I'm not cheating here to a new file. And then we're going to, I've already set this up on the right frequency for the radio and set all the other settings. There's not that many really. It sounds a little daunting, but it's not bad. I've got my sync here to look at the graph, and then I've got my file sync that I just set up with the new file name to grab that data and save it for us. Okay, so let's, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to arm the system, but it's the same signal if it disarms when it's armed or not armed. So we'll capture the signal. So I'll start this playing, and you'll see the graph come up. Okay, and that's what it looks like. So this blue stuff on the bottom is kind of the surface noise. That's just kind of stuff that's flying around already. So let me disarm the system here. My password is not 1234. Oops.
Alarm off.
Okay, so we just disabled the alarm from the keypad and recorded it to a file. Okay, so we'll stop that. That will stop the radio from receiving, and it'll save our file so we can access it elsewhere. Okay, so we turn it, now for this one, we'll turn it
Please exit now.
properly away. Okay, so we're really leaving the house. We'll do the door sensors to simulate a leaving. Right? Oh, it should make noise.
Warning. SimpliSafe cannot reach the dispatch center.
So
Please ensure
the
that
one
your
saving grace of
emergency
SimpliSafe
dispatch
is
service
that
is
if
activated.
you
can check
buy
your
their
account
monitoring,
online. In addition,
it will
please
tell you when
ensure
it gets
that the base
disarmed.
station is located in an area
But in
with
my
good
opinion, that's the
reception.
same as if you
You
had
can try
a
moving
device
it
that
near
sent
a
a text
window.
to your
Lastly,
phone and said,
if
hey,
you
this
are
happened at
trying
your
to connect
house.
through a landline,
Okay, is that a false
make sure that the
positive?
base
I don't
station
know,
is connected
because
to
it
a
was
telephone
disabled
jack with a
properly
dial
with the
tone.
proper code. But so it does help if you have the monitoring. The monitoring is completely optional though, so I'm skeptical that it's a high percentage of people that buy the monitoring because it's another fee, and I'd rather have Netflix or Spotify, right? Most people would, am I right? So, okay, is this thing armed yet? 12 seconds. Okay, so let me show you. Let's load up the file. So I've got my source file here, and I'm going to change it to the file we just created, which was called kpoffpresso. Okay, so that's the new file that we just recorded.
Alarm on.
Alarm.
Away.
Alarm's on. Careful, everyone. I'm just kidding. I turned off the motion sensor, so you can't set it off. Can everybody hear that talk, by the way? Okay. So now so the keypad's over here. It says alarm on, away. I'm going to set it over there. I have my HackRF1 right here connected to my computer on USB. And now all we're going to do is just replay that file that we just captured a few seconds ago. And we'll see the graph. We'll see the surface noise, the ground noise there, and then eventually you'll see a little spike right in here in just a minute, and it'll hold it. Hopefully, it will disarm. Hasn't fired yet. There it is.
Alarm off.
Am I right? Okay. And props to everyone in the crowd that clapped without me having to tell you to clap. I've done that a couple presentations. I don't know if that means I'm horrible or I've had bad crowd, whatever. Okay, so without really knowing much of anything, maybe we spent 5 or 6 hours running through Osman's videos. We dropped $300 on a HackRF. We have a computer already because we got one for free from work, right? We installed, we installed GNU Radio Companion, figured out how to work it. Michael showed us all that in the videos. In fact, his last video, the last flow chart that you stop with, you can use to do this exact thing. You just change the frequency to what you found out your device to be, and record it, replay it. This will work with the majority of everything. This is a security system designed to safeguard your house from intruders. Unfortunately, all I have to do is sit outside or down the road with a bigger antenna. When you leave, capture that signal that you, or when you get home, capture the signal that you unlocked your device, wait for you to go away for an hour, come back, disarm it legit. They're already at work. They're not going to come home on a false disarm of their alarm, probably, and that's if they have monitoring. If they don't have monitoring, they'd never know. You can also fully reset the system and the pin by holding two of the buttons, the menu button and the delete button down for about 30 seconds, and it'll re-default back to the 1, 2, 3, 4 pin. So then they don't tell you that on the support. They tell you they're doing their magic, and then it gets reset. But yeah, that happens. And then, so yeah, let me just pull this back up. So I'm glad that didn't fail. Okay, so how do we fix it? We can encrypt some stuff. This guy'd still get to it, right? Am I right? Who knows who this guy is? Superman, in my opinion. Superman. So we can encrypt everything, right? That's a good idea. Might spend a little bit more on the light bulb that has to have a little bit more computing power to decrypt and exchange keys, that kind of stuff. So there's some challenges there. We can also encrypt some stuff, right? Encrypt, sort of encrypt. We could make the communications random in some way. Then at least we'd get over the replay. The replay is like a skitty thing, right? That's anybody with a laptop and a $300 radio can do that. That should be the most alarming thing here. It wouldn't be that hard to implement some sort of random string, nonce, what have you, into the communications to at least overcome the replay. Super straightforward attack. Okay, So we can this is kind of what happens now on Z-Wave. We can encrypt high value targets. Okay, my deadbolt is encrypted. That's good. Thumbs up, right? That's pretty much the only thing that was encrypted on anything I tested. Just the deadbolt. So something, not everything. Devs cannot rely on obscurity. We've heard this before. Okay, this is pretty straightforward, normal information security principles here. Somebody's going to look at your stuff, and somebody's going to play with your stuff, and somebody's going to break your stuff. Always, without fail. The question is, how hard is it to break? And once it's broken, can you fix it? The SimpliSafe system does not allow in-field upgrades, flash upgrades to the firmware. The firmware it ships with is unupgradable. So never any updates ever for the life of the system. And this is version 2. This isn't version 1, people. This is version 2. So Ramsey better do his homework next time. And you have to just assume this stuff's going to be looked at and played with and messed with. And I hope that nobody does this. Like, I hope criminals aren't doing this. But they might. I don't know. It's not hard. Standard crypto, of course, to do that. And thanks, everyone. You've been awesome. I'm going to take one more crowdy because there's more people here now. I look more popular. Everyone smile. Woo! Saintcon's the best. Woo! Okay, awesome. Are we time for questions or no? Yeah. Questions? Do it. So it is a hobbyist device, and it didn't actually go through any FCC things, and I don't know exactly. I think it has something to do with how many are produced, how it's sold, and then who the target market is. So I don't have an exact answer for you, but it does fit some sort of loophole-ish situation. Yes. So the question is, was the hacker at the same price as the home security system? It was about $20 more. So yes, absolutely. Right there. Okay, so the question is, does each company that produces a device have to pay for the frequency they're using? That's true in some applications. When you're using the ISM bands, they're specifically designed for that, for free use. So that's where Wi-Fi sits. That's where 900 megahertz is another popular one. There's one in 400 megahertz that your car tires use. So yeah, as long as you're in the ISM band, you have to be evaluated for the interference that you're causing. Make sure that's within acceptable ranges. But no, then it's free to use those in those ISM bands. So one of the benefits of being a ham radio operator or license is that you have access to other bands that other people have access to, which is nice because they're cleaner. There's less interference on them. Less people broadcasting. Also, you can broadcast a bigger with more power. So could they use frequency hopping is a question? Yes, and they do. So Bluetooth uses frequency hopping. But people also break that too. So that alone, I don't think is enough. It is a bear. So if SimpliSafe used frequency hopping, I probably wouldn't have spent the time to figure it out so yeah, not encryption. Obscurity is not security. Any other questions? All right, awesome. You guys are great. Thank you.